We have been fed a diet of highly emotive images and anti-vivisectionist propaganda for so long that we have begun to believe that the people who carry out experiments on animals must be cruel torturers. In this program, I want to show you that that image is totally false. I'm going to make the case for animal research. In the past, I've conducted animal experiments myself, and I know that they're not cruel. In most cases, the animals feel no pain. I also want to expose the lies behind the propaganda of the animal rights movement, which claims that there are easily available alternatives to animal testing. It's just not true. The fact is that not only are animals essential for medical research, but as science becomes more complicated, we may actually have to use them more in the future. And the reason I feel it's so important to say this now is that I believe that the animal rights movement has created a climate of fear which endangers future medical research. Morning, Dan.
Morning.
How are you feeling?
Not so bad, thanks.
Super. No problems with temperatures, or
No.
I think you're okay with that, aren't you? I am a doctor working in the field of leukemia. The patients I meet and treat every day are people who have been diagnosed with cancer and who think they have been given a death sentence. Well, you seem to be coping as well as we could cope with that.
Over time, it becomes more and more difficult as time goes on to try and keep a positive mental attitude towards it, because it's very wearing.
When I first qualified, that was the case. A child with leukemia would expect to live for about 10 weeks. An adult under 40, about 6 weeks. Now, we expect to cure most children with leukemia, and then adults under 40, well, you'd expect to cure at least half of them. This is down to 3 major things. The first is better chemotherapy. We have drugs that actually kill cancer cells. And secondly, we have a much better understanding of how the bone marrow works, how it grows. And then there's bone marrow transplantation. Now, all of these advances only happen because of animal experiments. Without animal research, there will be no heart transplant operations, no anesthetics, and therefore very little surgery. There will be no drugs for people with asthma. Nor any blood transfusions.
By law, all new chemicals in products must be tested in animals to find.
The evidence for animal research is overwhelming, yet still the debate continues to rage.
We have the evidence. We've put together our facts. Our case is strong. Animal experiments don't work, and the law cannot work.
But within the scientific community, there is almost complete agreement.
Here the theory is being tested that fixed meals keep them healthier. The research has just started, and so many years may elapse before the results yield useful suggestions. Do companies like ICI, who have to do the cancer tests, worry about their validity?
Animals have been crucial in research and are crucial in research because it's only by studying useful models of the human situation where one has the complex interaction of different organ systems that need to be regulated together that we can actually get some insight into how our functions are regulated in both resting situations and when we undertake different forms of behavior that are intrinsic to our lives.
Ma, where are you, Ma? Just having a bit of a swill. Don't be afraid. Come and meet the general public. Morning.
The problem is that we have a confused attitude towards animals. We have given them human characteristics and created a world where lions and bears are cute and cuddly, sensitive creatures.
Is the general public nice, Ma? Well, child, the general public varies a great deal. Sometimes it's very nice, sometimes it's rather nasty.
But the truth is very different. In the wild, all animals are speciesist. They put their own survival first. And of course we should do the same. So that while in the cartoons we might be on the side of the rat or the mouse, in reality we're not. So why, when most of us have no problems eating animals, do we have problems when it comes to animal research?
It doesn't mean because we eat animals, which involves cruelty, we all know, that we have to go on building more cruelty and more. Animals are not inferior to us. We can't just go on finding ways to destruct. We have to think in terms of them as being another nation, different. Of course they have rights. All living things, all things that feel pain, feel fear, have to have rights.
Animals with rights and animals as another nation. This is the sort of sentimentality that I find extraordinary. As a Christian, I believe what the Bible says about animals. In Genesis, there is no talk of an animal nation. God made man in his image, to rule over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and over all the animals.
The Bible is not a vegetarian cookbook. From early on, people became flesh eaters. That wasn't originally so, and the Bible teaches about it won't ultimately be so. But in this fallen world, it is. The animals are there for our benefit. People have been given a dominion over the animal kingdom.
The Bible does say that we have dominion over them, but it doesn't say we can harm them and mutilate them and abuse them. Having dominion over something, which I don't agree with anyway, it is simply maybe the sheepdog herding the sheep for the farmer. That kind of action is a sort of dominion over them, but not to take them apart and give them excruciating pain just to keep us alive longer. That's not what it means.
Cruelty demeans anyone, whoever he or she may be. But I think it's really down to motivation. When a surgeon opens up somebody to deal with an appendicitis, his object is not to be cruel to that patient, it's to heal. And when an animal experimenter is there seeking a cure for cystic fibrosis in children, or maybe a related animal defect, then if his objective is ultimately curative and therapeutic, then that's not per se cruelty. The cruelty, inverted commas, is a byproduct, just like the open wound and the stitches are a byproduct of a surgeon's scalpel.
One thing which has helped the animal rights movement to argue that experiments must be cruel is the fact that most animal procedures go on behind closed doors. If it's secret, it must be cruel. But the truth is the action of the extremist animal rights groups which have driven us behind high walls and security barriers.
The explosion that ripped through the University Senate building last night caused extensive damage. But if the bomb had gone off during the day...
Scientists have been intimidated into silence. Even trying to find people willing to appear on this program has been extremely difficult. And just by presenting it, I make myself a potential target for these extremists. The truth is, we have absolutely nothing to hide. Since the introduction in 1986 of the Animal Procedures Act, Britain has become one of the most tightly regulated countries in the world with regard to the care of animals. In fact, I believe that animals in British laboratories today live in better conditions than many humans. What you're about to see is a very typical animal house, although again, for security reasons, we cannot identify the location.
In here we've got some of our mice. These are used in a variety of experiments, including cancer studies. They're standard conditions, so then it's no different for these as it would be for any other rodent in the laboratory. You can see they've got nesting materials, toys. The temperature is controlled, ventilation, humidity.
In fact, he's a bit pampered, this mouse. His temperature's better regulated than my house, and more so than it would be in the wild.
In the wild, they would be able to regulate their own temperature, sort of they control their environment. We put them in a cage. We have to take over that responsibility for them. These are the hamsters that are being used for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
They look very friendly and happy, don't they?
They are. If they weren't happy, they wouldn't be interested in us. If an animal's in pain or is suffering, so then it doesn't respond to humans. These are the absolute ultimate in rabbit accommodation. They're all kept to standard conditions, again with the temperature and humidity and stocking densities, but being able to keep them in floor pens is is really luxurious. It's how we would all like to keep our rabbits if we have the room, and if the research allows for it.
But every time the anti-vivisectionists go in and break into somewhere, they claim that they find something wrong. Recently there was an incident at Huntingdon.
Yeah, there was no doubt about that incident that was televised was definitely cruel. So the two technicians that were responsible for it have since been prosecuted. They've been dismissed by Huntingdon. However good a research organisation is, you'll always get rogues. As with any profession, you get nurses that don't look after patients, elderly care units that ill-treat them. So we're no different from anybody else.
OK, now look, you've shown me some mice, hamsters, rabbits. Where are the cats? Where are the dogs?
We don't actually have any here. So the bulk of the animals that are used in animal research are in fact rodents. Over 85% are rats, mice and other rodents such as rabbits and guinea pigs. Only 0.4% are cats and dogs, and less than 0.2% are primates. That you just won't find cats and dogs in the majority of animal houses.
So these pictures we see on the posters for animal libs of cats and dogs being tortured, it's just not true, is it?
The majority of those photographs are very old. They've been imported from overseas. It wouldn't be allowed to happen in the UK under present legislation. Cats and dogs are controlled, the conditions they're kept under are controlled the same as any other animal, just like the rabbits, that sort of thing. We have to keep them under certain conditions. You can see they're perfectly happy. Any pain that they might experience is regulated, and generally speaking, they have a good life.
One of the reasons so many experiments are carried out on mice is because they have a short life cycle, which means we can study a disease through all its stages and get results more quickly than with a larger animal. And despite what the anti-vivisectionists would have you believe, making sure that the animal is not in pain is very important for good scientific reasons.
There's absolutely no point in performing an experiment in an animal that's in pain and therefore in distress, because it would interfere with the variables that we're also trying to measure. The vast majority of animals in this country, the most that happens to them is, in terms of perceived pain, would be a simple injection to induce general anaesthesia, and all of the subsequent experimentation would then be carried out under a general anaesthetic where, of course, there would be no pain.
Anti-vivisectionists often argue that experiments must be cruel because over 65% are carried out without anaesthetic. But this is because most of the procedures are so simple and pain-free that giving an anaesthetic would be more traumatic for the animal than the simple procedure. But then, this is just one of the many misleading statements put out by the animal rights movement. Attacking cosmetic testing helped the animal rights movement to gain massive public support. But I believe the issue has allowed the movement to seriously mislead the public about product testing on animals.
There's a myth at the moment that products can come to the market that haven't been tested on animals, and I think it is clear that every single chemical that comes into contact with man, whether it is a new pharmaceutical for the treatment of disease, domestic product, or in fact a new cosmetic ingredient, are tested on animals. Now, it is clear that there are some companies now claiming that their products have not been tested on animals, and I think this is being used to great effect for marketing purposes. But in fact, really the ingredients contained within these products have at some point in their development been tested on animals.
There are legal safety requirements why new ingredients must be tested before they come into contact with humans. But the idea of endless repetitive testing isn't quite true. Companies must be able to prove that a new drug or medicine has significant benefits over existing formulations before they will be registered. This is why I get so angry about the claims made by the animal rights movement, claims I believe to be seriously flawed.
The bottom line is that animal experimentation is misleading. It's unscientific and it continues to kill people and animals every year. There are too many internal interactions that vary between species to give accurate results when using animals. Just a few very simple examples. Penicillin kills guinea pigs. Aspirin kills cats and causes birth defects in virtually all laboratory animals. And if you take rabbits, they can tolerate very high quantities of what is for us a very toxic substance, deadly nightshade, yet cats have a very low tolerance to an everyday substance like lemon juice. Lemon juice kills cats. Therefore, you cannot extrapolate between humans and other animals in scientific research.
Of course, there are differences between animals and man, and we as a scientific community are well aware of the arguments that have been put forward of certain drugs working or not working in certain species and not others. But at the end of the day, within 100 human beings, there are many differences as well. And I think that animals are clearly the closest thing we have to man at the moment if we have to study a living system. And in many situations, we have to study living systems to understand complex diseases. And so the experimental animal is currently the best thing that we have.
Okay, so I'm going to put the nose clips on. And if you could pop that into your mouth.
No one is claiming that animals are identical to humans or that we all respond in the same way. That's why clinical trials, like this one into the study of asthma, are also carried out. The point of the animal experiment is to find out what sort of dose we should give, how to give it, and most importantly, so that we can be as certain as possible that it is safe.
And blow right out until you're empty. That's it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And breathe normally. Good.
Human volunteers for medical research sound absolutely wonderful, and there are many occasions on which it is appropriate. But in the vast majority of cases, it really is not appropriate because aside from studying the immediate effect of a therapy or a drug, we actually need to go ahead and then take tissues to see where the drug has acted and how it's acted. And it's certainly not appropriate for us to have human volunteers that we would then expect to kill and remove tissues from.
For strong practical and ethical reasons, therefore, we simply could not use human volunteers, even if people were willing to come forward in large enough numbers.
Huge numbers of alternatives do exist and can be used right now. We have things like MRI and CAT scans, which could look deep into the body and monitor the progress of a cancer or another disease. You have complex computer models and mathematical models, which can simulate what will happen to a specific pathogen in the body. You have skin and cell and tissue cultures, which can be used. Recently, the University of Uppsala has widely published a report showing that the use of whole human cells is twice as effective in determining the toxicity of a substance than using the whole animal.
There's clearly been a revolution in our understanding of science, and I think the introduction of technologies such as MRI and CAT scans, the introduction of cell culture techniques, the ability to grow certain cells or even tissues in vitro has really helped us enormously in understanding complex diseases. As a result, the number of animals being used is reducing every year. But again, there are certain disorders that only occur in a living system. So I rather see these new developments as complementary techniques. They're not alternatives.
In fact, 95% of all scientific experiments don't involve the use of animals at all. Animals are only used when there is no alternative. Or rather, where the alternative is to watch children and their parents suffer.
Paul were both beautiful babies and lovely little boys, and they were very much like any other child. I first noticed that there was something wrong with Stephen when he started going to nursery school. Stephen would put one foot up on the step and then his hand on his knee to pull himself up, which is very typical of children with muscular dystrophy.
Stephen was diagnosed when he was 4 3/4, but we didn't think there was anything wrong with Paul because he looked so agile, so we had him tested as well, and he was only 2.5 at the time, and the diagnosis was confirmed that he too had the Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. They're both very bright children. I mean, they got 15 O levels and 8 CSEs and 2 A levels.
By the time they were 11.5, they had to go into wheelchairs permanently. And not long after that, they both had to wear spinal support jackets. Paul died first, 9 days before his 21st birthday, and Stephen, who was 2.5 years older, died less than 4 months later.
I think if people had gone through the experience that we've gone through, I think they might feel differently about animal research.
We still have to find a cure for diseases like muscular dystrophy, which is why we must continue to explore new areas of science. Professor Michael Spire is a basic research scientist. Much of his work is driven by scientific curiosity and a desire to understand the unknown.
This is the experiment that we're doing on an anaesthetized rat. We're actually...
Anti-vivisectionists claim this sort of research is the most cruel and unnecessary. But the history of science demonstrates that solutions often come from the least expected sources. Now, this particular animal is anaesthetized and it's not going to be allowed to recover, therefore feels no pain. What about the question of pain? Are there some experiments where animals feel pain or they suffer?
All the experiments that I'm concerned in a wide range of vertebrates are all in this sort of situation, non-recovery anaesthetized animals. But there are instances where the question requires the use of a non-anaesthetized animal for one reason or another, where there is a certain degree of psychological stress that needs to be applied. But these are very, very rare, and the majority of experiments are of the sort that I'm showing here, which involve an anesthetic, involve non-recovery situation, where following the experiment, once the animal has been killed, we need to remove tissues in order to determine where drugs have acted or where other metabolic changes have taken place.
Now, this is basic research. You've got no particular defined end in view.
Absolutely right. We're not looking at any specific drug or trying to define any specific novel therapy in this particular case. And from the sort of work that we do, often we're taken down new pathways because our observations lead us into totally different fields. So we don't always know with this sort of experiment where we're going to go.
Good science doesn't always give predictable results. Time and again, the unpredictable has been the most important element in scientific investigation. In my own field, basic research has proved invaluable in finding unexpected solutions to real problems.
I've had quite a lot of side effects with the drugs, etc., that I've been taking. Most obviously is loss of hair, which is one that you can cope with and you know about beforehand, and it's relatively easy to accept. But there are other things, particularly when your immune system's down. When I had a temperature for a week, my temperature got worse and worse. The antibiotics that they were giving me to treat this weren't doing any good, and it actually got to the extent where I was almost hallucinating on my bed. I was lying on my bed and it felt like my bed was being tipped sideways and I was going to fall off my bed at any point.
Well, Dan, this is where you're going to be for the next couple of weeks. I need to talk to you about some of the side effects that you're going to get while you're in here. This year we'll see the launch of a new drug for the treatment of cancer, which overcomes many of these side effects. The drug is based on something called monoclonal antibodies, which were discovered in the 1970s by 2 Cambridge scientists trying to understand how our bodies recognize and fight off germs. Take X-rays. This work was basic research. Their motive was curiosity. They just wanted to find out how humans work, how animals work. They had no idea that 20 years later it would lead to a new treatment for cancer without side effects. But that's exactly what happened. Proof of the pudding. Basic science works. But anti-vivisectionists are now putting future research work at risk. They have manipulated the truth so much and become such a vocal lobbying group that they are in danger of hijacking this debate. Already the new Labour government shows alarming signs of caving into their pressure. At the moment, it is proposing a ban on the growth of all monoclonal antibodies in mice. Instead, we're going to have to grow them in machines, which is fine as long as they will grow in machines, but many of the best monoclonals won't, and that's going to put patients' lives at risk. Putting unnecessary barriers in front of science impedes progress and harms us all. In order to continue our work, we need an open road ahead to save lives and to make a better future for people and animals. If you have any program ideas for Counterblast, you can write to the Community Program Unit at this address, or send us an email.
At the kennels, Gleeful is expecting her first litter.